This is Dosbury Pool, where, according to legend, King Arthur received the sword Excalibur from the Lady of the Lake. In this programme, we look at the man behind the myth and put together a picture of who he really was.
King Arthur has a very colourful legend. Most of the stories about King Arthur came from medieval fiction writers who were eager to write a romance about Arthur and sell many copies of their works. They present Arthur as a great Christian warrior king who crusaded in Jerusalem, quested for the Holy Grail, and took control of Western Europe. However, there is evidence to suggest that Arthur's period was much earlier than medieval times, and was in fact in the Dark Ages. The Easter Annals are our best and most reliable resource for finding out who Arthur was. They are historical records from the Dark Ages and tell of Arthur leading the Britons in battle against the Saxons and emerging victorious. We know in the years before Arthur, the British Celtic tribes were being united against the Saxons by Ambrosius Aurelius, who held the title Dux Bellorum, meaning Duke of Battles. Ambrosius began a campaign to drive the barbarians from the east back, but by 517 there was a new king of the Britons, Arthur.
If Arthur was Dux Bellorum around 517, as the Easter Annals suggest, then it is extremely likely that his home base was here, on Tintagel Island.
Arthur was most likely to have come from Dumnonia, with Tintagel as its royal capital. He would have had his apprenticeship under Ambrosius and learned kingship from him. Dumnonia was still by far the richest kingdom when Arthur took the crown. As the Romans left Britain, so too did their use of currency for trade. Following this, a barter system was revived, and instead of money, high status was commonly expressed through the possession of luxury goods and belongings. Imported Mediterranean pottery became one of the predominant icons of royalty and wealth. And through archaeological studies, the places of power and affluence in Dark Age Britain can be traced. At Tintagel, more expensive Mediterranean pottery was found at the one site than the rest of the British Isles put together. Geoffrey of Monmouth, writing in 1132, described Tintagel as where Arthur was born and raised.
The description of the Dark Age settlement of Tintagel provided by Geoffrey was shown by recent excavations to be unusually accurate. Geoffrey visited Tintagel in 1120, and none of these buildings would have been visible at the time. If Geoffrey was right about Tintagel, was he also right about King Arthur?
Recent excavations on Tintagel Island have discovered further evidence for Arthur's kingship. In 1998, a 6th century stone was uncovered bearing the inscription of the name Artognu, a possible reference to Arthur. The Latin inscription Artognov can be translated into the British form Arthnu, the beginning of which means the bear in Welsh. Could this be a connection with the bear that the monk Gildas mentions in his book of the Dark Age British Kings? This evidence comes from the right kingdom, the right royal stronghold, the right social class, and the right time for Arthur. The discovery of the Arthur stone brought further attention to the fact that in the 6th century Tintagel was a very high status royal household from which a dynasty of literate kings ruled the whole of Dumnonia.
Although Tintagel may not have been Camelot, it is possible that the story of the Round Table had its origins here. Arthur would invite his Celtic chieftains to Tintagel to offer them luxury goods in exchange for help in fighting battles. The Round Table became a metaphor for fair trade between Arthur and his Celtic chieftains.
It may be clear that Arthur's base was in West Dumnonia. However, there is no evidence to suggest that he held permanent residence here. The search for Camelot takes us to Caerleon on the west coast of Wales.
Caerleon was described by Sir Thomas Malory as Camelot in his book Le Morte d'Arthur. However, the medieval writers had got the wrong idea as to what Camelot was. Camelot was not a many-spired capital city built on the riches of crusade and conquest. Rather, it was a mobile royal court of the High King.
If Camelot was mobile, then it would explain how difficult it is to pin down. Some critics argue that Camelot never existed. The word Camelot may have come from the old British war god Camulus, and may have survived from Iron Age times, meaning little more than the war camp.
After his early career in Dumnonia, King Arthur was crowned leader of the Britons here at Caerleon by Bishop Dubricus. This is what Geoffrey of Monmouth tells us, but is corroborated by local tradition and archaeological evidence. It was this coronation that marked the beginning of the campaign against the Anglo-Saxons.
The Saxons were still moving westwards into Britain unchecked. Ambrosius's work in unifying the Britons was carried forward by Arthur. For the first time, the British rode forth to meet the Saxons in full strength. The Dark Age site of South Cadbury is thought to have been of great importance to Arthur's military power.
This is South Cadbury Castle. We know it was occupied during the time of King Arthur. What's interesting about South Cadbury is that it was 5 times larger than any other Dark Age fortress. This gave it the capacity to hold huge quantities of men.
This is exactly what Arthur needed as leader of the Britons. A safe gathering point near to the Saxon territory was critical in keeping the enemy at bay. It was likely that tribes would muster here before marching to battle alongside King Arthur. There would be food and music provided to lighten the warriors' spirits.
Archaeological evidence has shown that these defences were refortified around 470. This suggests that Ambrosius knew the importance of this site in his campaign against the Saxons. Under the leadership of King Arthur, South Cadbury was used as a rally point for the British armies before their campaign at Mount Badon.
The journey from South Cadbury to Mount Badon was about 3 days' ride. This was a relatively short journey by Dark Age standards.
Battles in the Dark Ages were usually fought at the ford or crossing of a river. This is Salisbury Hill, where the River Avon is crossed by the Roman road Fosse Way. It is at this location which is the most likely place for the Battle of Badon.
It is very difficult to say exactly how the Battle of Badon was fought. Perhaps the Celtic heroes faced the Saxons in single combat. King Arthur with his great sword single-handedly slaying the finest Saxon warriors of the age. Perhaps an infantry force of Celts marched in formation down Mount Badon, whilst cavalry units terrorised the Saxon flanks and wore them down. Arthur became the most renowned hero of his age after winning this great conflict, and a change came over Britain as a result. The Saxons were now confined to the east.
Badon was the biggest victory the British had against the invaders. According to the writer Gildas, there was a period of peace with the Saxons that lasted 20 years afterwards. Now Arthur's role would change to that of peacekeeper within the warring factions of Britain itself.
Britain was rich in kings. Each had their own ideas for how Britain should be led, and few could come to any agreements. For 22 years, there was a golden age of peace, stability, and justice. Arthur and his court visited the 17 known kingdoms of Britain, solving border disputes, bringing justice to brigands, and attempting to cement the alliance that had been formed before the Battle of Badon. But alas, this period of peace was not to last. The ruthless Maelgwyn, having murdered his uncle to become king, seized the throne of the kingdom of Gwynedd in North Wales and started a rebellion against the High King. King Arthur, receiving word in the south, assembled his army and rode north to Gwynedd to end this threat and quell yet another uprising. But it was not to be. Treachery was afoot. The Easter Annals describe in 537 the Battle of Camlan in which Arthur and Medrawd perished. Maelgwyn the arch-traitor sent his Ordovician warriors to ambush Arthur in one of the steep-sided valleys that led into his kingdom.
As Arthur's army rode north to Gwynedd, Maelgwyn's men were waiting for them. This is the most likely location for the Battle of Camlan, where the river Gamlan flows into the river Mawddach. Maelgwyn would have waited in the forests above the valley, and as Arthur's troops and cavalry were bottlenecked at the ford, in a perfect position for an ambush.
Shh, quiet. Get ready to attack. Ready to attack. Easter Annals tell us that Arthur was either killed or mortally wounded in the battle with Maelgwyn. This is likely because in the following years civil war broke out again in Britain, and chaos reigned as Maelgwyn took the title Dux Bellorum. According to legend, Arthur was taken by boat to the Isle of Avalon, where his wounds would be tended until the time of his return in the hour of Britain's greatest need. In the Dark Ages, Glastonbury was surrounded by marshes which would flood and freeze in the winter. This would have given it the appearance of an island. Some believe that Arthur's body was buried in Glastonbury, which may have been the Dark Age Isle of Avalon.
The name comes from Celtic mythology, which refers to Glastonbury as an island surrounded by shallow waters accessible only by boat. This would have been like this in Arthur's time. Celts like to bury their dead on islands because they believed that islands had a mythic quality.
It is not likely that this is the real King Arthur's grave. Glastonbury is too far from Camlan for it to be feasible that Arthur was carried here. It is also too close to the Saxon border. However, at Glastonbury Abbey there is a grave that is claimed to be King Arthur's.
After a fire in May 1184, the abbey was in desperate need of funding, so they began digging. Conveniently, they discovered an iron cross bearing the inscription, "Here lies the renowned King Arthur, buried in the Isle of Avalon."
This find was good for the British monarchy at the time. Arthur's prophecy of returning in the hour of Britain's need struck great fear into the hearts of its enemies. It was also good for Glastonbury Abbey, raising its profile on the pilgrimage map. These all too convenient facts should make us suspicious about the authenticity of Glastonbury as Avalon. The discovery was too well timed. The most promising candidate for the real Avalon is Whithorn in Galloway, on the northern shore of the Irish Sea. A church had been established there for over 100 years and has been found to have had a very unusual graveyard. This was likely to have been Arthur's refuge after his defeat, a short sea voyage from North Wales. This special graveyard was found by archaeologists on the Isle of Whithorn to be from the time of Arthur's death a few years after Camlan. It is probable that this really was the grave of King Arthur.
The evidence for the existence of King Arthur is ultimately inconclusive. Yet, from what we have seen, it is certain a Dark Age figure united the Britons against the invading Saxons and brought about a period of peace after they were turned back. The strength of the Celtic resistance to the invaders created a legend that has lasted for many centuries, personified as Arthur, the man behind the myth.